Welcome, dear dreamer, to the Sleeping Hourglass. Our story is a Japanese one, a story not of armies or empires, but of loyalty and silence, of men who chose patience over fury and honor over life. It begins in Edo, in the long corridors of ceremony, and it ends in falling snow, where blades are sheathed not in rage, but in devotion. It is the story of the Ronin, the masterless samurai who gave their final breath to keep a vow. And if you find peace here, if you'd like to keep this little sanctuary alive, you might consider gently subscribing or leaving a soft sign of support. Not for numbers, not for noise, but simply so this quiet place can always be here, waiting for you when the day grows long. The story of the 47 Ronin does not begin with blood, nor with snow, but with silence. It begins in the still chambers of Edo Japan, where the air is heavy with incense, where men bow lower than their thoughts, and where the weight of a word can cut deeper than steel. Here, in the 17th century, the samurai live as both swordsmen and servants. They walk through the corridors of power not merely as warriors, but as guardians of a fragile harmony. Their steps are measured, their voices subdued, their lives tethered to a code older than memory. This code is not written on scrolls alone. It is etched into their gestures, their breath, their very deaths. It is Bushido, the way of the warrior. Bushido is not a law imposed by rulers. It is a mirror held before the soul. It speaks of loyalty that bends neither to temptation nor fear. It demands courage in the face of darkness, and yet it is not courage of reckless charge, but of calm endurance. It values honor above life itself, for to live without honor is to wander without a name. And so, in Edo, men of the sword carry an invisible burden heavier than their blades. The knowledge that their worth is measured not by victories, but by fidelity, by discipline, by silence when silence is required. The sword is more than a weapon. To the samurai, it is the outward shape of the soul, forged in fire, folded until impurities vanish. Each blade reflects not just the craftsmanship of smiths, but the purity demanded of its wielder. A samurai polishes his sword as though he polishes his conscience, for rust is a stain both on steel and on spirit. In the blade's gleam he sees not only his face, but the fragile thread binding him to his ancestors. To live by the sword is to accept death as constant companion. Death is not tragedy, it is the horizon toward which all paths move. The samurai do not fear it, for fear corrodes duty. Instead, they rehearse it quietly in their hearts each morning, whispering to themselves that today may be their last. In that acceptance, life acquires clarity. Every gesture, every glance, every bow becomes deliberate, an offering to the present moment. As though eternity might judge it, this world of quiet discipline is not without tension. To the outsider, it may seem rigid, even suffocating, but within it lies a strange freedom, the freedom of purpose. A samurai does not wander aimlessly. His path is defined by service. His lord is not merely a man of higher station, he is the axis around which a samurai's existence turns. To betray one's lord is to unravel the fabric of identity. To serve faithfully is to find meaning that outlasts one's breath. And yet, beneath the polished surface, Edo is a city alive with contrasts. Lanterns glow over narrow streets, merchants haggle in markets, poets write of fleeting blossoms, and actors on kabuki stages parody the very codes samurai bleed to uphold. The common folk live with different measures of duty, rice harvests, family debts, small joys by the riverbank. But always, Looming above is the samurai's presence, figures of authority, symbols of discipline, reminders that society itself rests upon invisible vows. It is into this landscape of order and ritual that our story takes root. For the Ronin were not born in rebellion, they were born in loyalty. They grew in soil watered by the teachings of Bushido, and it is precisely because they were faithful students of the code that their tale endures. Bushido is not one thing, it is a constellation of virtues. Gi righteousness, Yu's courage, Jin's compassion, Rei's respect, Makoto honesty, Meiyo honor, and Chugi loyalty. These are not lofty abstractions to be recited in ceremony alone. They are to be lived, tested, proven in the quiet furnace of daily choices. When a samurai bows before his lord, he embodies Chugi. When he spares the weak, he lives Jin. When he chooses death over disgrace, he fulfills Meiyo. Each virtue is a thread, and together they weave the invisible fabric that holds a samurai's world. Yet the fabric is fragile. A single insult can tear it. A single misstep in ceremony can undo a lifetime of loyalty. Honor is not stored in vaults. It is carried in the breath of each day, as fleeting as smoke. And so the samurai live with a kind of trembling awareness, as though walking across a thin sheet of ice. Beneath them lies the abyss of shame, a darkness more feared than death. Edo Japan is quiet, but it is not at peace. Behind the rigid politeness of courtly manners lie rivalries, jealousies, and the ever-present question of power. Lords maneuver for favor at the shogun's court. Retainers bear the weight of their master's ambitions. And within the polished wood of palaces, tempers are tested, patience stretched thin. The samurai know that silence can wound as surely as a blade. To endure an insult without breaking is considered strength. To let pride ignite into action, folly. Yet there are moments when silence itself becomes unbearable. It is here, in this crucible of restraint, that our tale prepares to unfold. For one daimyo, Asano Naganori of Aiko, will soon find himself tested not by battlefield but by insult. His patience will be stretched until it frays, and the code he has sworn to uphold will demand of him a choice. The seed of tragedy is already present, hidden in the soil of ceremony, waiting for the day when pride, duty, and insult collide. But before we follow that path, we linger here in the calm, before the storm, in the stillness of a world built upon duty. For to understand the Ronin, one must first understand the ground beneath their feet, the invisible weight upon their shoulders, and the sacred fire in their hearts. Their vengeance is not born of anger alone. It is born of centuries of discipline, of countless mornings rehearsed in silence, of a culture that teaches a man to prefer death over dishonor. Imagine, then, walking through Edo at dusk. The streets are hushed, the lanterns begin to glow, and a temple bell hums across the rooftops. You pass a samurai on a bridge. His hand rests lightly on the hilt of his sword, not in threat but in readiness. His eyes meet yours briefly, and in them you see not arrogance, but the quiet certainty of a man whose life belongs not to himself. He is bound by threads you cannot see, bound to his lord, to his ancestors, to his code. Around him the city buzzes, but he moves within a different rhythm, as though he walks already within the realm of eternity. This is the world the Ronin inherit. This is the silence from which their cry will rise. Their story cannot be told without it, for their act of vengeance is not the rebellion of lawless men, but the culmination of loyalty nurtured in the still waters of Bushido. And so, in the quiet glow of Edo's lanterns, We leave the samurai standing at the threshold of destiny, bound by code, yet vulnerable to the frailty of men. Beyond this silence waits a lord, a burden, and the first stirrings of conflict. In the vast archipelago of Japan, the land is divided not only by mountains and rivers, but by loyalties. Each region answers to its lord, and each lord bows to the ultimate power of the Tokugawa shogunate. The year is 1701, and Edo, the shogun's city, is the beating heart of this intricate web of authority. Within its wooden halls and tiled rooftops, the smallest gestures carry weight. A bow too shallow, a silence too long, a phrase misplaced. Such things ripple outward like stones dropped into still water. It is here that we meet Lord Asano Naganori, daimyo of Oko. His province is small, coastal, known more for salt than for conquest, yet its modest size does not lessen his responsibility, nor lighten the weight that sits upon his shoulders. For a daimyo is not merely a ruler of land, he is a living emblem of his people's dignity. His conduct is their mirror, his honor their shield. Asano is still young, just past 30, with the gravity of responsibility pressed upon him early. He carries himself with restraint, as is expected of one entrusted with both swords and subjects. When he walks, his retainers follow in silence. When he speaks, his words are measured, even cautious. In Oko, he is master. In Edo, however, he is but one among many daimyo, summoned to serve, observed closely, judged constantly. This is the paradox of a lord in Tokugawa Japan, power and powerlessness intertwined. At home, a daimyo is absolute. In Edo, he is a servant, bound by the rituals of attendance, by the laws of the shogunate, by the invisible gaze of those who measure his every breath. For Asano, duty brings him to Edo Castle. The halls are grand, the tatami polished smooth by the passage of generations. Painted screens whisper of cranes and pines, symbols of endurance and longevity. Yet beneath the beauty lies tension. These are corridors of ceremony, where protocol is as sharp as a hidden blade. Each lord must perform his role flawlessly, for failure is not merely personal, it stains the name of his ancestors and the fate of his descendants. The task set before Asano is to oversee and assist in the reception of envoys from the emperor's court. It is no small matter. The shogun himself, though supreme in power, must show deference to the emperor in Kyoto, for the emperor embodies the divine lineage of Japan. To receive imperial envoys with anything less than perfect grace would be unthinkable. The ceremonies are labyrinthine, the rules complex, the expectations absolute. For this reason, instructors are appointed, men who guide the daimyo in the precise art of courtly etiquette. Among them is Kira Yoshinaka, a high-ranking official of the shogunate. It is Kira who holds the knowledge of ritual, who ensures the envoys are honored without flaw. To displease him is to risk dishonor. To please him, one must navigate the delicate balance of respect and generosity, yet beneath the surface of duty an unease grows. Asano, though sincere and disciplined, is unskilled in the subtleties of court politics. He is straightforward, a man shaped by the simplicity of Oko's coastal winds. Kira, by contrast, is steeped in the intrigues of Edo, where alliances are bought as often as they are earned. Whispers suggest that Kira expects gifts, tokens of appreciation, offerings that blur the line between respect and bribery. Asano, proud and earnest, offers little, and what little he gives is dismissed as inadequate, almost insulting. The tension begins quietly, like hairline cracks in a porcelain bowl. Kira's instructions grow curt. His words carry the sting of condescension. In the chambers of practice, his criticisms of Asano are sharp, delivered not in private but in ways that humiliate. Asano bears them with restraint, yet the weight gathers within him. The burden of a daimyo is not only to lead but to endure, and so he endures. Day after day he enters Edo Castle, bows deeply, and listens to the lectures of a man who seems determined to belittle him. To protest would risk disgrace. To strike back with words would risk far worse, and so he holds his silence, carrying the burden as though it were another layer of armor. Still, the cracks widen. Behind closed doors, others whisper of Kira's disdain. Rumors reach Asano's ears, carried like drifting ash. He is mocked not only in private but in murmurs that cling to the walls. The humiliation becomes public, his patience stretched thin. In Bushido, patience is a virtue, but honor has limits. A lord's dignity, once too deeply wounded, may demand redress, and yet, in these moments before history sharpens, we must pause and see the man. Asano is not a figure of legend yet. He is simply a daimyo, bound to serve, struggling beneath the weight of expectation. He carries the burden of his province, the watchful eyes of his retainers, the invisible thread of Bushido that binds his life. His heart is a battlefield unseen, where pride wrestles with duty, and where silence threatens to collapse into fire. Edo itself seems complicit in his struggle. The city is alive with order. Bridges arched gracefully over canals, markets humming with trade, samurai moving in deliberate rhythm. Yet even as it thrives, it presses upon those within its orbit. A daimyo cannot breathe freely here. He is both guest and prisoner, watched, evaluated, measured against the unyielding standards of a system designed to keep him in place. Asano bows, day after day, before the shogun's authority. He performs the rituals, he practices the ceremonies, he endures the humiliations. Outwardly, all seems calm, but beneath the stillness, a storm gathers. For the burden of a daimyo is not only external, it is internal. The burden of restraint, of swallowing pride for the sake of peace, of carrying insult without retaliation. Yet every man, even the most disciplined, carries within him a limit. To live under Bushido is to carry both sword and silence. But when silence cuts too deeply, the sword becomes inevitable, and so we leave Asano in this moment, walking the corridors of Edo Castle, bowing, listening, enduring. His face is calm, his posture composed, but within him the trembling has begun. Honor is not broken yet, but it wavers. Pride is not shattered, but it is raw. The burden grows heavier each day, and history moves quietly toward its breaking point. And in that silence, where patience strains and dignity trembles, the air itself seems to tighten, awaiting the moment when insult cuts too deep, and a lord's restraint finally breaks. The halls of Edo Castle are silent, but silence here is not peace. It is tension, stretched across tatami floors and gilded screens, the silence of men watching, measuring, waiting for the smallest misstep. In these halls, ceremony reigns. Every bow, every gesture, every carefully chosen word carries the weight of tradition and expectation. It is within this crucible that Kira Yoshinaka stands, a man entrusted with guiding daimyo through the labyrinth of imperial etiquette. His face is calm, his robes impeccable, his voice smooth as lacquer, but beneath the surface lies something sharper. He is a gatekeeper to favor, a man whose knowledge gives him power, and he wields that power not gently, but with the sting of contempt. Kira does not demand respect. He expects it. He is said to look upon the lords of the provinces not as honored guests of the shogun's court, but as men who must prove their gratitude with offerings. In Edo, gifts are not uncommon, tokens of appreciation, gestures of goodwill. Yet, with Kira, such offerings blur into bribes, and those who give less than he desires find themselves greeted with disdain. Lord Asano Naganori of Oko is among them. Young, earnest, bound by a sense of integrity that resists corruption, he offers what he believes proper. Tokens of courtesy, not lavish bribes. To Kira, this is insult. To Asano, the expectation itself is dishonor, and so the air between them grows heavy with unspoken animosity. Day after day, in preparation for the ceremonies that will welcome envoys of the emperor, Kira delivers his instructions with deliberate cruelty. He corrects Asano in front of others, his words laced with mockery. He belittles his efforts, as though the daimyo of Oko were a child fumbling with lessons too complex for his grasp. He calls him ignorant, unrefined, unworthy of the place he occupies. Asano bows, he listens, he endures. But patience is not infinite. Each insult is like a drop of water on stone, small but relentless. Each humiliation carves a deeper mark into his spirit. For a samurai, honor is breath itself. To breathe under constant scorn is to breathe poison. And so within Asano, a fire begins to grow, a fire he works to contain, for Bushido teaches restraint, teaches that anger must be mastered, teaches that dignity is found in silence. Yet Bushido also teaches that dishonor cannot be ignored. The two teachings clash within him, unresolved, unyielding. On the morning of the 21st day of the third month, the tension finally breaks. The castle is alive with preparation. The shogun's court stirs with anticipation for the imperial envoys whose arrival is imminent. Lords and officials move through the halls with purpose, their silken robes whispering against the tatami, their sandals echoing softly like measured drums. Asano is present, his face composed, his demeanor calm. Yet within him, the storm rages. He has endured too much. His pride is raw, his spirit wounded by the endless disdain of Kira. He moves through the corridors, every step weighed down by the memory of humiliation. And then, the moment comes. Accounts vary. Some say it was a word, sharp as a blade, an insult that cut deeper than any before. Others say it was the culmination of many days, the unbearable weight of constant contempt. What is certain is this: in the great hall of Edo Castle, under the gaze of heaven and history, Asano's hand moves to his sword. The blade sings as it leaves its sheath. In an instant, silence shatters. The forbidden act has occurred. Steel has been drawn within the palace of the shogun. Asano strikes. His blade flashes toward Kira, seeking the life of the man who has humiliated him. The strike is not clean. The wound is not fatal. Blood is drawn, but Kira leaves. Shock ripples through the hall. Servants scatter, courtiers cry out, and the air itself seems to freeze around the act. For in this place, violence is unthinkable. The sword is sacred, but here it is forbidden. In that instant, Asano knows the cost. His strike, though fueled by pride and by justice as he understands it, has broken the unbreakable law. To draw steel in Edo Castle, to shed blood within its sacred walls, is to defy the shogun himself. No insult, no humiliation, no grievance can justify it. The punishment is certain, swift, and absolute. Kira flees, his life spared by chance, his dignity shaken but intact. Asano lowers his blade, the fire within him burning now with a different heat. The heat of realization. His life, as he has known it, is over. He has crossed the line from which no man returns. For a samurai, death is always near. Asano has rehearsed it in silence each day, as Bushido demands. Yet he did not imagine it would come like this. Not on a battlefield, not in service to his province, but in the gilded hall of Edo Castle, his blade stained with the blood of insult. The shogunate moves quickly. Guards seize him. Word spreads through the palace, then the city. Whispers race along the corridors, carried like sparks upon dry grass. A lord has broken the law. A daimyo has drawn his sword where no sword may ever be drawn. The consequence is known before it is spoken. Death. Yet for now, the hall is quiet again. The blood on the floor is being cleaned. The courtiers return to their positions, and the ceremonies continue as though nothing has occurred. Such is the way of Edo. The outward face of order must not break, even when history itself has shifted beneath it. But for Asano, the shift is absolute. He has moved from patience to action, from endurance to defiance, from life to the shadow of death. His fate is sealed, and with it, the fate of 47 men who serve him. They do not know it yet. He does not know it fully. But in the drawing of a sword, the future has been written. The insult has gone too far, and in answering it, Asano has set in motion the story that will echo for centuries. And so the hall falls quiet once more, but beneath its polished calm lies a wound that cannot be hidden. Asano's blade has drawn not only blood, it has drawn judgment. And the dawn that awaits him will be his last. In the hush of the shogun's palace, the air still trembles from the echo of steel drawn too soon. The moment is brief, measured in heartbeats rather than minutes, but its weight stretches across centuries. Lord Asano Naganori has struck his enemy, Kira Yoshinaka, yet the wound is shallow. A cut across the face, not the death blow that anger had summoned. The act is forbidden, a crime not only against a man but against the order of the realm itself. The polished corridors that had witnessed the harmony of ritual now ring with disbelief. Courtiers whisper, servants retreat into shadows, and officials step forward with severity carved into their brows. The palace, a place meant for formality and controlled ceremony, has become a stage for dishonor. Asano stands with his blade still trembling, the enormity of his act settling upon him like a mountain of stone. The silence of the hall is not the silence of peace, but of judgment waiting to fall. For in Edo, under the reign of the Tokugawa shogunate, the laws are clear. Violence within the sacred walls of the shogun's palace is unthinkable. No insult, no humiliation, no wound to honor can justify bloodshed here. Asano is seized, his sword taken from him. The man who only moments before embodied the dignity of a daimyo now stands as a criminal. There is no trial of length, no jury of peers, no debate of motive. The act speaks louder than defense. Word passes swiftly, Asano Naganori is to die by seppuku. The ritual suicide of the samurai, the cutting of the belly, the spilling of life as an offering to preserve honor even in death. It is both mercy and punishment, demanded when a man has failed yet is still granted the dignity to die as a warrior. That night, the chambers are prepared. Witnesses assemble, for such an act cannot be hidden. In the stillness, the atmosphere is heavy, as though the walls themselves mourn. Asano kneels, dressed in white, his face calm though his life has been shattered in the space of an instant. He does not plead, nor curse, nor shout his grievance to the heavens. His silence is its own poetry, a final acknowledgement that his fate is sealed. Before him lies the dagger, gleaming like a shard of frozen moonlight. Ritual words are spoken. The ceremony begins. With steady hands, Asano takes the blade, presses it against his abdomen, and draws it across. Pain is sharp, and life spills out. But before agony can consume him, a trusted second, brings down the blade to end his suffering. The ritual is completed. Thus ends the life of Lord Asano Naganori, daimyo of Oko, at only 35 years of age. A man humiliated, a man provoked, and finally, a man condemned. His dawn has been stolen, leaving behind not only a grieving household, but a company of loyal retainers who are suddenly cast adrift. The shogunate acts swiftly. Oko domain is dissolved, its lands seized, its people scattered. Samurai who once served proudly under Asano's banner awaken to find themselves stripped of rank, of salary, of purpose. They are no longer men of standing but Ronin, masterless warriors, wanderers with no place in the order of things. 47 among them refuse to let the thread of loyalty be cut. To the world, they appear broken, their lord gone, their house ruined. But within their hearts burns an ember that cannot be extinguished, the oath of fealty sworn to Asano. They are not bound by coin now, nor by law, but by something older, deeper, by the soul of Bushido itself. Yet, in this moment, that future is still hidden. For now, grief lies heavy upon them. The streets of Oko are quiet, as though the town itself has forgotten how to breathe. The retainers gather in silence, stunned, unwilling to believe that their lord has vanished into the dark so suddenly. His death is not simply the loss of a man, it is the breaking of a world. They remember his last walk, the composure of his face, the ritual dignity that masked the storm within. They remember his hand upon the blade, the blood spilled not in battle but in penance. They remember the unfairness of it, the insult endured, the provocation unanswered until it became unbearable. And most of all, they remember the unfinished strike, the wound upon Kira that did not finish the matter but only deepened it. The shogunate believes the case closed. The law has spoken, order has been restored. But within the quiet corners of Edo and the sorrow-filled houses of Oko, a different story begins to write itself. For honor does not end with a lord's death. It lingers unresolved, like a ghost calling for justice. The 47 Ronin, though scattered, carry this ghost within them. Some speak of vengeance in whispers, others counsel patience. Still others fall into despair, their lives hollowed by the sudden collapse of all they had known. Yet among them, a seed is planted, a seed watered by grief, by loyalty, and by the memory of their master's silent dignity. History will remember this moment not only for Asano's death, but for what it births. For in the stillness that follows his seppuku, something ancient stirs, the idea that duty does not die when a man dies. That loyalty, once sworn, is not so easily buried. The shogunate cannot see it yet, but the Ronin already walk upon a path that will carry them into legend. They are men stripped of home and name, but in that stripping lies the possibility of an act so great it will echo across time. The law has removed their master. The code of Bushido has not. The halls that condemned Asano grow quiet once more. Yet in Oko, in the hearts of the dispossessed, silence is not the end. It is the beginning. As the blade of Asano is sheathed forever, the hands of his men tremble with grief, not yet resolve. But grief, when joined with loyalty, begins to sharpen into something else. Something the world will soon come to fear. The ink of their lord's death had barely dried upon the scroll of memory when the men of Oko found themselves standing in the hollow of a world suddenly emptied. Their master, Asano Naganori, had taken his final bow upon the tatami mats of Edo, ending his life with the quiet precision that only a samurai could carry to its last breath. The blade had entered his belly not as a failure, but as a sealing of duty. Yet, for those left behind, the wound remained open, raw and unhealed. In the stillness after the act, the men gathered in shadows, as though afraid that even their grief might betray them. Edo moved on with its bustle, its markets, its temples, its snow falling gently upon tiled roofs. But for the retainers of Oko, time had split. The world had turned once, and left them stranded between loyalty and law, between silence and the storm. At the center of them stood Oshi Kuronosuke. His face was not the stern mask of command, but the weathered calm of a man carrying the weight of 47 other lives. He did not raise his voice. He did not brandish steel. He listened, he absorbed, and he waited for their restless murmurs to still. Then, in words measured and low, he reminded them of the truth that lay like a blade across their path. Their lord had died dishonored. His blood had been spilled not for treason, not for cowardice, but for an insult answered too swiftly. And Kira Yoshinaka, the man whose arrogance had ignited the fire, still walked beneath the shogun's sun, unpunished, untouched. The halls of power had spoken, the law had been served, the order maintained. But within the chambers of loyalty, the balance trembled still. Oshi did not call for rage, he did not summon vengeance as a shout to the heavens. Instead, he spoke of silence, of patience, of the long road that lies between the breaking of a vow and the mending of honor. He told them they could not move quickly nor recklessly, for the eyes of the shogunate watched them as hawks watch the trembling grass. To act rashly would bring only more dishonor, more death without meaning. And so the oath was formed, not in the crash of swords, but in the stillness of bowed heads. Each man, one by one, agreed to carry the fire within, but keep it veiled beneath ashes. They would vanish into the folds of Edo, scatter into disguises, dissolve into the ordinary lives of merchants, monks, and wanderers. The world would believe they had abandoned their duty. Their enemies would laugh, whispering of their cowardice. Yet beneath the masks of disgrace, beneath the thin fabric of deception, the oath burned steady. For the samurai, the word loyalty was not a cloak to be worn and cast aside. It was marrow, it was breath. To live without it was to already be dead. And so, though they would walk among the living, their true lives ended with their lord. What remained was but the unfolding of a single vow, to restore balance, to let the blade fall where justice demanded. The meeting was simple, almost stark. No drums, no banners, no proclamations carved into wood. Just the whisper of resolve, like incense curling in an unseen wind. Oshi looked at each man, not as soldiers, but as brothers bound in silence. He did not promise victory. He did not promise life. Only that their deaths, when they came, would carry weight enough to bend history. It is strange how such vows, made in hushed voices, outlast the loudest of wars. Armies march, cities fall, but the memory of 47 men who chose patience over impulse lingers like the scent of pine in winter. Perhaps it is because their decision was not born of ambition, nor greed, nor even survival. It was born of devotion. The quiet, relentless devotion that outlives even the body. The men left the gathering not as warriors, but as shadows. Some shaved their heads and donned the robes of monks. Others drank until they seemed hollowed of purpose, their dignity stripped. Wuxi himself would play the part of a drunkard stumbling through the streets, mocked by those who once respected him. To the outside world, they were broken men, scattered fragments of a fallen house. But beneath the surface, the oath lived. Letters passed unseen, hidden within folds of cloth, carried by hands that never lingered long in one place. Swords were concealed, sharpened in secrecy. Time itself became their ally, each passing month weaving a thicker veil of forgetfulness over their enemies' vigilance. The world began to believe they had truly abandoned vengeance. Yet in the deep places of their hearts, the oath pulsed like a heartbeat. To carry such a vow is not easy. It is to live two lives at once. The outer life of failure, the inner life of fire. To smile at those who scorn you, to bow to those who mock your disgrace, all while knowing that your hand itches for the hilt. It is a test not of the sword, but of the spirit. And perhaps that is why the Ronin's story endures, because their greatest battle was not fought in Kira's mansion, but within themselves in the long patience of silence. In the stillness of nights, when even the moon seemed to rest, Oshi must have sat alone, listening to the weight of the vow. Did he doubt? Did he fear? We cannot know. But what we do know is this: the vow held. Through mockery, through the erosion of years, through the quiet gnawing of uncertainty, it held. And thus history bends quietly toward that oath. Not loudly, not quickly, but like snow accumulating upon a roof until the whole structure sags beneath its weight. The Ronin did not rush, for they understood that vengeance without patience is but another form of dishonor. They waited until the season itself turned in their favor, until the silence had ripened into inevitability. This is where the true courage of the Ronin lies. Not merely in drawing their blades, but in sheathing them for so long, in living the half-life of disguise, in bearing shame so that honor might one day return. It is a lesson heavy as stone. Sometimes the deepest strength is in restraint, the truest loyalty in silence. And so under Edo's watchful sky, the oath was carried like an ember in each man's chest, invisible to the world, but impossible to extinguish. From the hush of that vow, the Ronin scatter like leaves upon the wind, each man wearing a mask to guard the flame within. Yet even in disgrace, the fire waits, patient as winter, leading us toward the long season of silence, where honor hides behind masks. Patience is a blade sheathed, its edge hidden yet never dulled. For the 47 men who once walked proudly in their Lord's service, life now became an exercise in concealment. Their oath had been spoken, their vow sealed in silence, and yet the path to vengeance could not be taken in haste. The shogun's officials watched, Kira's allies whispered, and the eyes of Edo waited for a misstep. To move too soon would have turned loyalty into rebellion. So they chose to vanish, dissolving into lives not their own. The Ronin scattered like seeds upon the wind. One man became a merchant, his hands ink-stained from ledgers instead of caroused from the hilt. Another took on the robes of a wandering monk, chanting prayers by temple bells that tolled for other men's grief. Some drifted into trades of wood and stone, fishermen upon the Sumida, laborers bent over timber beams. They blurred themselves into the ordinary, wearing the cloak of common life until suspicion passed them by. But behind each quiet disguise, the same ember glowed. A vow cannot be unspoken, and in their silence it grew sharper, as if time itself hung the edge of their purpose. Oshi Kuronosuke, their leader, bore the heaviest mask of all. Once the steward of Oko's castle, Respected for his wisdom and clarity, he now chose disgrace as his armor. To protect the plan, he would become a man emptied of dignity, so convincing that even those who once honored him turned away in disgust. He took to the tea houses, not in hidden strategy, but in loud drunkenness. Night after night, he drank until his speech slurred, until his body sagged against the pillars of taverns, until the courtesans laughed behind their sleeves at his folly. He played the fool so well that even his enemies began to believe the charade. The proud Oshi, it seemed, had drowned his grief in sake, wasting his days in a haze of wine and women. Kira's spies watched him closely. At first, suspicion lingered. Perhaps the drunkenness was a ruse, perhaps Oshi plotted still. But as months turned to years, their vigilance waned. Who could fear a man sprawled in gutters, too sodden to lift a blade? Who could believe that a samurai who once walked like pine in the wind now stumbled like broken bamboo? The city whispered that the men of Oko had lost their spirit. They were pitied, mocked, forgotten. Edo moved on, as cities always do, swallowing scandal into its endless rhythm of trade and ceremony. And yet, the truth lingered in hidden places. Oshi's disgrace was not weakness but cunning. In every stumble, he measured the lessening of Kira's guard. In every insult endured, he bought another day of secrecy for his brothers. Patience is not merely waiting, it is waiting with intention. And Oshi, behind the mask of drunken shame, counted the days like beads upon a rosary, each one bringing them closer to the night when silence would break. But patience is not without its torment. For a samurai, honor is breath, and to live without it is to suffocate slowly. Imagine the taste of mockery on the tongue, the sting of contempt in the eyes of strangers, the weight of one's children watching a father fall from dignity. Oshi endured it all. Once, as he lay collapsed in a street, a passerby, a fellow samurai, not of his clan, kicked him and spat, denouncing him as a disgrace to the warrior's name. Oshi did not rise, did not defend his pride. He let the insult settle like dust, because his pride was not his own anymore. It belonged to the vow. The other Ronin bore their disguises in quieter ways. A few took wives, built small shops, or grew accustomed to the routines of men who had no blades to sharpen. Outwardly, they seemed settled. Inwardly, every sunrise was a reminder that they lived not for themselves, but for a reckoning yet to come. To wait is to wrestle with the self. Doubt coils in the silence. Will justice ever come? Will time erode resolve? Some must have wondered whether the oath could withstand the long erosion of years. Yet, whenever shadows gathered, Oshi's presence steadied them. Though he appeared drunk to the world, in secret he remained the calm center, writing letters that passed in secret, ensuring that the vow did not fray. The seasons turned. Spring blossoms fell into rivers. Summer rains washed Edo's streets, autumn winds shook loose the red leaves. Still, the Ronin remained hidden. 2 winters passed, and in each the snow fell upon Oshi's staggering form, while beneath his mask he counted the hours. History often remembers battle, but not the waiting before it. Yet it is in this waiting that the true measure of the Ronin lies. For the art of patience is harder than the art of striking. To swing a sword is a moment, to sheath it for years is a lifetime. Their enemies believed time would dissolve their resolve, but instead, time distilled it until only the purest essence remained. And so, the city forgot them. The name of Oko faded from the lips of courtiers. The scandal of Asano's death dimmed in the lantern light of new intrigues. Even Kira, at first wary, began to believe the danger had passed. He went about his life with less caution, his mansion less guarded, his household less alert. The fire that once flickered in fear had dimmed to a smoulder. This was the patience the Ronin waited for. The quiet moment when arrogance returned, when vigilance gave way to complacency. What is striking is how history often preserves not only what men did, but what they endured. The Ronin's endurance, their long concealment, became as much a part of their legend as the night of their vengeance. Because in enduring shame for so long, they proved that honor is not fragile, not easily shattered. It can bend beneath weight, appear broken, and yet rise again when the time is right. Think of a river in winter. On the surface, ice forms, silent, unmoving, deceptive. But beneath, the current flows strong, unseen, unstoppable. So too with the Ronin. The city saw only the ice of disgrace, the stagnation of men who seemed to have surrendered. But beneath, the current of their vow moved ceaselessly, carving a path toward an inevitable sea. There is a stillness to this chapter of their tale, and yet it vibrates with hidden motion. Every drunken stumble of Oshi was a step closer. Every disguise, every insult borne, was a thread weaving the tapestry of what was to come. Patience itself became their weapon, sharper than steel, because it allowed them to choose not just when to strike, but how to ensure their strike would matter. And so, as the second winter gave way to another spring, the Ronin remained scattered, unseen, almost forgotten. But in the silence of their waiting, history leaned forward, listening for the moment when the masks would fall away. In their silence, they seemed erased from memory, yet beneath the masks, the vow endured. Like snow gathering unseen on rooftops, heavy and waiting. And soon, the weight of that waiting would bring them back together, as winter itself became their summons. Winter carries a hush unlike any other season. Snow drapes itself upon rooftops, muffles footsteps, and dims the clamor of the world. In that softened quiet, hidden things can move unseen. It was in such winters, 2 of them, that the men of Oko endured their long disguise, waiting as patience ripened into inevitability, and then, like snowflakes drawn back into a single drift, they began to return to one another. 2 years had passed since Lord Asano's death. 2 years since Oshi Kuronosuke and his brothers scattered into masks of shame, disguising devotion beneath humiliation. Time, that most relentless of forces, had done its work. Kira Yoshinoka, the man who had provoked their lord and lived untouched, now moved through Edo with less fear. His guards grew fewer, his walls less closely watched, his vigilance slackened. The city had nearly forgotten the Ronin's oath, but the Ronin themselves had not. It began with whispers carried like smoke. A folded letter slipped into the hands of a merchant who looked like any other. A coded phrase, exchanged by a traveller on a snowy road. Blades once hidden beneath floorboards were brought out and polished under lamplight, the gleam of steel catching the flicker of flame. Slowly, quietly, men who had lived apart began to turn their faces toward one another again. The gatherings were not loud or triumphant. They were hushed, reverent, like the meeting of monks in midnight prayer. Each man, when he returned, brought with him the weight of silence endured, the shame carried like armor, the fire kept alive through seasons of waiting. They looked into one another's eyes and saw mirrored resolve. None had broken. None had abandoned the vow. Imagine the feeling of those reunions. Men once scattered like fallen leaves now gathered in the same room, their voices subdued, their gazes steady. No feast was spread, no music played. Only the quiet sound of breath shared among brothers who had chosen death long ago. Their purpose bound them, stronger than blood, stronger than time. Ushi, who had borne disgrace, as though it were a second skin, now stood before them not as a drunkard, but as the steward once more. His mask had served its purpose. The city saw only ruin in him, but his men saw the iron that had never bent. He spoke calmly, clearly, with the measured cadence of a man who had walked with silence for so long that every word carried gravity. The time had come, he said, for patience to yield to action. Each man knew the cost. To strike at Kira was to embrace death. The shogun would not pardon them, the law was clear. Their vengeance, no matter how righteous, would be rebellion in the eyes of authority, yet not one faltered. They had carried dishonor for 2 years, and now the chance to transform shame into meaning lay before them. To refuse was unthinkable. To hesitate was impossible. And so, preparations began in earnest. Weapons were restored from their slumber. Blades were sharpened, their edges whispering as whetstones slid across steel. Armor was hidden, then brought out in pieces, concealed in bundles of wood or beneath innocuous wrappings. Messages were sent, not through proclamations but through the silent language of loyalty, each man knowing his place, his role, his hour. The city did not notice. To the people of Edo, life continued in its endless rhythm. Merchants cried their wares, courtesans plied their trade, monks chanted sutras in temple courtyards. But beneath the hum of daily life, an invisible current gathered strength. The Ronin, once dismissed as broken men, were weaving themselves back into one body. The patience of years was crystallizing into a single night yet to come. Winter deepened and snow fell upon Edo. Its flakes settled on the wooden bridges, softened the lantern-lit streets, and covered the tiled roofs in pale silence. The season itself seemed to conspire with the Ronin, offering its cloak of quietude to their purpose. Just as snow blankets a garden, concealing the seeds waiting beneath, so too did winter conceal the flowering of vengeance that waited beneath the city's calm. In hidden rooms, the Ronin rehearsed their plan. Every movement was considered, every door of Kira's mansion imagined, every guard anticipated. They would not march as an army but move as shadows, precise and disciplined, each man a thread in the larger weave. They were not fueled by rage but by inevitability. Theirs was not a storm of fury but the still fall of snow, quiet, steady, relentless. What gave them strength was not the promise of survival but the certainty of death. Knowing that no dawn awaited them, they carried themselves with a strange calmness. When a man has already accepted his end, fear loses its grip. What remains is resolve and the serenity that comes from walking a path chosen freely. 2 winters had been the crucible. In those years of waiting, they had tempered their spirit, stripped away all but the essential. Now, reunited, they were no longer scattered men, but a single purpose clothed in 47 bodies. The city might forget them, but history would not. There is something haunting in the way silence ripens into action. It is like watching a candle burn low, its flame steady until the final moment when wax collapses and light flares one last time. The Ronin were that flame, waiting, until the hour came for brightness before extinguishing, and so, as snow continued to fall upon Edo, the men of Oko prepared themselves. They wrote letters of farewell, some to wives, some to children. Knowing their words would outlive their bodies, they placed affairs in order, tied loose threads of life so that nothing would be left unfinished. Death to them was no longer a spectre, but a companion walking beside them, calm and unthreatening. Each man, in his own way, must have wrestled with the quiet ache of what he was leaving, yet the oath was greater than individual longing. It was the bond that had already carried them through disgrace, through silence, through years of endurance. It was now carrying them toward the night that would define them. The season of patience had given way. The gathering was complete. The vow was whole once more, sharpened by winters of waiting, prepared to cut through the complacency of a city that believed them gone. From their long silence, the Ronin rise as one. Snow settling upon their shoulders like a blessing. The night approaches when patience will give way to steel, when the falling snow will no longer hide them, but guide them. The winter sky hangs low over Edo, heavy with clouds that promise snow. The city has gone quiet in its slumber, streets dim, shutters drawn tight against the cold. Lanterns flicker faintly in the wind, their flames bending as though bowing to the night. And then, softly, it begins, the falling of snow. First in hesitant flakes, then in a steady curtain, until the world is muffled in white silence. It is on this night, when the heavens themselves seem to veil the earth, that the Ronin move. For 2 years they have waited, their lives scattered like leaves in autumn. They have worn disguises, suffered insults, bent their backs to work far beneath their station. Some have grown weary, some have aged, but none have forgotten. Tonight, they step once more into the current of their oath. Oshi Kuronosuke, their leader, walks at the head. His pace is steady, his face serene. The mask of drunkenness he once wore has fallen away. No longer the figure of ridicule, he now reveals the stillness of command, the quiet dignity of one who carries both grief and purpose. Behind him, the others follow. Men who once served Lord Asano, bound now by the single thread of vengeance. They are not many, 47 in all. And yet, as they move through the snowy lanes of Edo, they feel less like men and more like a tide. Every step is deliberate. Every breath is measured. The snow deepens as they approach their destination. The mansion of Kira Yoshinoka, the man who provoked their lord into the fatal strike that led to his ruin. Within these walls, the man who has slept soundly under the protection of his title, unmarked by the shame he caused another, now slumbers unaware that the past is walking toward him. The Ronin divide themselves with careful discipline. Some take the rear gates, others the front. Silent signals pass between them, gestures rehearsed countless times in the secrecy of taverns and hidden rooms. And then, with one breath drawn as if the earth itself were pausing, they strike. The gates fall open with the weight of their force. The mansion stirs awake in alarm, guards rushing forward with weapons hastily drawn. But the Ronin are ready. Their blades gleam in the torchlight, slicing through the snow-heavy air. The clash is sharp, brief, and final. These men fight not with fury, but with clarity. Their movements are calm, even graceful, like a practiced dance where each step has already been written. The guards, startled and disoriented, falter before this wave of determination. One by one, they fall. Within, the halls echo with confusion. Servants scatter, doors slam, voices cry out in warning. Yet the Ronin advance, each room checked, each passage swept. They are searching for one man only. Oshi commands without raising his voice. His words are few, but they steady the men. Remember, he whispers, we are not thieves in the night. We are retainers fulfilling our duty. They press deeper into the mansion. The snow outside continues to fall, slipping through broken gates and drifting across the tatami floors where doors stand ajar. The white flakes mix with blood, with footprints, with the scattered remnants of a life lived in comfort about to be undone. At last, they find Kira's chamber, yet the man himself is nowhere in sight. The room is empty, the bedding undisturbed. For a moment, the night itself seems to hold its breath. Has he escaped? Has their years of patience dissolved into nothing at the final hour? They search, moving quickly, turning over screens, pulling open doors. At last, in a small storehouse at the back of the mansion, they find him. Kira is hiding, trembling in fear, his face pale and drawn. Gone is the composure of a court official. Gone is the arrogance of the man who once sneered at Lord Asano. Before them now is only a frightened man, clinging to life as though it could shield him from justice. The Ronin surround him. Their swords are drawn, but none strike immediately. Ushi steps forward, his eyes steady. He offers Kira a choice, as custom demands. The blade is placed before him. Die as a samurai should, Oshi says quietly, but Kira cannot. His hands shake, his lips quiver. He cannot bring himself to lift the steel. The silence stretches. Snowflakes drift in through the open door, melting as they touch the wooden floor. At last, one of the Ronin steps forward and ends it swiftly. It is done. The air seems to exhale. The mansion, once filled with noise and struggle, grows still. The Ronin do not shout in triumph, do not linger in cruelty. They bow their heads, solemn as priests at an altar. Their vengeance is complete, yet their faces bear no joy. This is not victory. It is fulfillment of an oath, a burden carried to its final weight. They take Kira's head, wrapping it with care, as though handling a relic. Together, they leave the mansion as snow continues to fall, covering the scars of their passage, erasing footsteps even as they are made. Their destination is Sengakuji Temple, where their Lord Asano rests. Through the silent streets of Edo they walk, still in formation, bearing the proof of their loyalty. People stir in their homes, whispering at the sound of distant movement. Some rise to watch from windows, glimpsing the strange procession of men moving through the snow like spirits. At the temple, they kneel. Before Asano's grave, they lay the head of Kira, the man whose treachery began all of this. The snow drifts gently upon the stone, upon the graves, upon the bowed shoulders of the men who have given their lives to duty. In that moment, time itself feels suspended. The oath is fulfilled, the balance is restored. The story, though not ended, has reached its turning. For soon, the city will awaken. The shogunate will hear of what has transpired. Judgment will come. Yet for this night, under the falling snow, the Ronin find their peace. And as dawn begins to edge against the horizon, the snow still falling soft and endless, the Ronin know that their journey is not over. For vengeance has its price, and the weight of loyalty must yet be measured by the hand of the shogun. Dawn lifts slowly over Edo, its pale light falling across rooftops glazed in snow. The city stirs with whispers before it wakes fully, like a dream spreading from mouth to mouth. Servants pause at their morning tasks. Merchants linger before opening their stalls. Guards at the gates exchange glances heavy with disbelief. The news runs faster than footsteps. Kira Yoshinoka is dead. His head rests at Sengakoji, offered upon the grave of Lord Asano. The impossible has been done. The people know the story at once. They know who carried out the deed, the masterless men who once served Asano. 47 samurai who vanished into silence, and then reappeared as the storm itself. They struck in the dead of night, and by dawn their vow had been completed. No one doubts it. The snow is still fresh, and the city hums with the sense that history itself has shifted overnight. And where are the Ronin now? They are not fugitives, not hiding in alleys or fleeing into mountains. They are waiting, calm, deliberate, as though this outcome had been decided long ago. Their swords, still clean from the night's ritual, rest beside them. Their armor, damp with melted snow, gleams faintly in the weak light of morning. They sit together at the temple of their master, where incense curls above the grave. They have returned home, not in defeat, but in completion. When word reaches the shogunate, the city's heartbeat quickens. Soldiers are dispatched, officials summoned, judgments prepared. Yet even the most seasoned guards hesitate when they arrive at the temple gates. For here sit men who should, by law, be criminals. Yet no one can call them dishonorable. They have not raised their blades against the shogun. They have not rebelled against the state. They have only fulfilled the oldest obligation of a samurai, to avenge the shame of their lord. The Ronin stand as one when summoned. They do not resist. Their surrender is not an act of defeat, but of dignity. Their leader, Wushi Kuranosuke, speaks with quiet authority, his voice steady as a winter stream. He explains what they have done, why they have done it, and why they now give themselves over to judgment. His words are few, but they carry the gravity of years. The guards listen, and in their silence is something close to reverence. The march begins. Through Edo they walk, 47 men bound not by chains, but by their own acceptance of fate. Crowds gather at the edges of the streets, eyes wide, voices hushed. Some bow their heads in respect, others weep quietly, and still others watch in awe at the sight of men who have already become legend. The Ronin do not shout, nor do they lower their gazes. They walk as if in procession, each step measured, each breath aligned with the rhythm of duty. Snow crunches beneath their sandals, the sound of it carrying through the silence of the crowd. The air is sharp, but they move without shiver, warmed by resolve. It is said that children in the streets bowed as they passed, and old men leaned on their canes to whisper prayers. Women pressed their hands together in silence, watching these men walk towards certain death, yet seeing no fear upon their faces. The city, for a moment, becomes a single witness, united in stillness. What does it mean to walk toward death so calmly? The Ronin embody the answer. For them, life and death are not opposites, but two chambers of the same house. They have lived for this deed, and now that it is done, they no longer belong to themselves. They belong to their master, to their code, to the story they have carved into time. To walk toward judgment is not to lose life, it is to complete it. As they pass through the streets, memory travels with them. Each man remembers the day Lord Asano fell, the blood upon the palace stones, the silence that followed. Each man recalls the long months of waiting, of disguises and patience, of living in shadows so the world might forget. Each man carries the weight of the vow spoken in quiet rooms, sealed with bowed heads and steady eyes. Now, as their footsteps echo in unison, they carry that memory like a torch that does not flicker in the wind. The shogunate receives them not as mere prisoners, but as men whose crime is difficult to name. The officials see them kneel, unbound, their swords laid before them, and in that moment even the sternest judges must feel the tug of conflicting truths. Here are men who have broken the law, and yet upheld the essence of loyalty. Here are men who must die, and yet whose honor cannot be touched by execution. The march ends not in a dungeon, but in quiet chambers where they will wait for the shogun's decision. The city continues to buzz, torn between admiration and fear, reverence and uncertainty. Some whisper that the Ronin should be pardoned, honored as models of fidelity. Others argue that to pardon them would unravel the order of law, encouraging chaos beneath the banner of loyalty. But the Ronin themselves do not speak of pardon. They do not ask for mercy. They have already chosen the road that leads only one way. Within the chamber, Oshi sits among his men, his presence a calm anchor. He knows the burden of leadership, the ache of patience carried too long. Yet now that their journey nears its close, he feels no regret. He speaks softly to his comrades, reminding them that their master waits beyond. Some men write farewell letters, others sit in quiet meditation. The night deepens, and with it, the sense that they are not bound to the shogun's decision, but to something older, deeper, beyond human judgment. Outside, Edo continues to move, the marketplace reopening, the bells of temples ringing. Yet everywhere, people carry the story. The Ronin have surrendered. The Ronin have walked through the city with dignity. The Ronin now await their fate. And in every telling, the story grows, clothed in awe. Already they are becoming more than men. Already they are becoming symbols. The last march is not only their journey through the streets of Edo, it is the journey from flesh to memory, from duty to legend. Step by step, they have walked out of life and into the stillness where history preserves them. The snow that fell upon their shoulders that morning will melt, but the image of their procession will remain, carried in ink, in woodblock, in whispered stories passed down through generations. The Ronin themselves understand this. They have no illusions. They know their end is certain, and they accept it with the serenity of men who have already given their lives away. Their march is not toward death, but toward completion, toward the closing of a circle that began with an insult in a palace, and now nears its end in the silence of surrender. And so the Ronin sit in waiting, their march complete, their fate resting in hands not their own. Yet even as the shogun weighs his choice, the question hangs in the air. Is the law stronger than loyalty, or does loyalty itself carve a law deeper than any decree? The answer lies in the chambers of power, where the shogun now ponders the destiny of 47 men. In Edo, winter presses against the city with a still hand. The streets remain hushed, though the tale of the Ronin swirls through them like wind through bare branches. Everywhere, people speak in lowered tones of the men who avenged their master and then surrendered without resistance. Their names pass from door to door, their faces imagined around the warmth of charcoal braziers. Admiration and unease mingle in the air, for the people know that what has been done cannot easily be judged by simple law. In the chambers of power, the shogun Tokugawa Tsuneyoshi listens. Reports arrive. The Ronin stormed Kira Yoshinaka's mansion, killed him with precision, and offered his head at the tomb of Lord Asano. They did not plunder, nor burn, nor flee. Their blades struck once, and then fell silent. Now they kneel in waiting, calm as stones. The shogun knows the weight of this moment. His dynasty rules by law, by order as firm as the walls of Edo Castle. If men are permitted to take justice into their own hands, what becomes of that order? Yet, if these 47 are punished as common criminals, what becomes of honor itself? The question lies before him like a blade on tatami mats, bright, sharp, and without easy touch. Courtiers whisper their counsel. Some speak of strictness. The Ronin must die, for law is the spine of rule, and no exception can be made. If one lord may be avenged outside the shogun's command, what prevents another from rising in rebellion under the banner of loyalty? Mercy may plant seeds of chaos. Others urge reverence. These men have acted not for themselves but for their master. They embody the essence of Bushido, the way of the warrior. To condemn them is to condemn loyalty itself, the very virtue upon which samurai society rests. The shogun listens, silent, weighing. He knows that whatever path he chooses, history will not forget. Beyond the castle walls, the Ronin remains still. They do not clamour for pardon. They do not protest their innocence. They have laid down their swords and accepted the road that follows. For them, the shogun's judgment is not a burden, but a formality. Their fates, in their own eyes, were sealed the moment Kira Yoshinaka's head touched the grave of Lord Asano. One might imagine their waiting as restless, but those who glimpse them report otherwise. The Ronin pass their days in quiet composures. Some write letters to their families, leaving words that will outlast them. Others sit in meditation, hands folded, eyes closed, as if already walking through a gate unseen. They eat sparingly, they speak little. In their silence is a serenity the world struggles to understand. Yet the debate rages on. Should the Ronin be praised or punished? In teahouses, poets begin to compose verses about their deed. In marketplaces, merchants tell the story with admiration. To the people, these men have already stepped into legend. Their choice is seen as pure, untainted by self-interest. They avenged their lord not for gain, but for devotion. And yet the people also know the shogun cannot ignore the law. To rule is to guard order, and order is a fragile vessel. The dilemma deepens. To pardon is to set precedent. To condemn is to darken virtue. The shogun holds the decision like a scale that shifts with each breath. It is said that he considered forcing the Ronin to live, a punishment greater than death. To deny them the honor of ending their lives as samurai, to strip them of seppuku, would humiliate them more than execution. Yet such cruelty would stain his own reign. To crush their dignity would dishonor not only them, but the memory of their master, and the people might turn against such severity. The shogun's advisors remind him, power is perception. A ruler does not govern only through law, but through the stories told about him. If the shogunate appears merciless, it risks alienating the hearts of its samurai class. If it appears indulgent, it risks weakening its grip upon authority. The decision is less about 47 men than about the foundation of rule itself. And so the days pass. The Ronin wait. Edo whispers. The court argues. The shogun ponders. Winter deepens, pressing the city into a hush that seems to echo the silence of those who kneel in patience. One evening, the decision begins to take shape. The Ronin are not rebels. They have upheld samurai honor. Yet they have broken the law. They have killed without the shogun's sanction. To leave them unpunished would indeed unravel order, but to condemn them as criminals would dishonor loyalty. The middle path emerges. They will be granted the death of samurai, seppuku, an end both lawful and honorable. It is a judgment that balances on the edge of paradox, mercy within punishment, honor within death. The Ronin will die, yet their dignity will remain untouched. In fact, it will be enshrined. By allowing them seppuku, the shogun ensures they leave the world not as outlaws, but as samurai who completed their duty to the end. The decree spreads through the court, and then through Edo. When the people hear it, their whispers shift into tones of solemn respect. The shogun has chosen a path that upholds law, yet honors loyalty. The Ronin will not be pardoned, but neither will they be shamed. They will end as they lived, bound by devotion. Inside their quarters, the Ronin receive the decision without surprise. It is as they expected, perhaps even as they hoped. To live in dishonor would be a wound deeper than death. To die as samurai is a gift within judgment. They bow, they thank the messengers, and they prepare. Their faces remain calm, their voices steady. The circle that began years before, with Lord Asano's seppuku, is nearing its close. The shogun has resolved his dilemma, yet in resolving it, he has ensured that the story will endure. For his judgment does not end the tale, it preserves it. The Ronin, by dying with honor, step fully into legend, and their story becomes a mirror for generations. A tale not only of vengeance, but of the delicate balance between law and loyalty, between order and the soul's compass. Winter remains heavy upon Edo, but in the hearts of its people a light flickers. They know that soon the Ronin will depart this world. Yet in that departure lies not erasure, but permanence. Their names will not fade. Their graves will not be forgotten. The shogun, in his dilemma, has chosen both law and memory. Thus the shogun resolves the question, weaving law and loyalty into a single judgment. Yet even as the decree is sealed, another dawn approaches, a dawn when 47 men will kneel together, and their final act will become eternal. The winter sun rises weakly over Edo, pale and cold, as though reluctant to shine upon the city that stirs beneath its light. Snow lies heavy on the rooftops, muffling the streets in silence. This morning is unlike any other, though the bells toll as always, though merchants still prepare their stalls, though children laugh in the frost-bitten air. Somewhere deep within the city, history bends toward a solemn moment. Behind walls and gates, the 47 men wait. They have been told their sentence, death by their own hands. It is no surprise to them, for they have lived each day since Kira's fall with the shadow of inevitability resting on their shoulders. They did not act in ignorance. They did not expect pardon. Their path, chosen long before, leads here. An end that is also a completion. The shogun, after much counsel, has decreed that they shall not die like common criminals. They will not be hung or executed by the sword of another. Instead, they will be granted the dignity of seppuku, the ritual death of the samurai. In this, the shogun acknowledges the purity of their motives, even as he affirms the iron law that vengeance, however righteous, cannot stand above the state. The men bow their heads at the verdict. None protest, none plead. It is the answer they had expected, the one their souls were already prepared to receive. For months they lived not as men, but as spirits in waiting, walking, speaking, breathing, yet always half departed. Now the moment of departure has come. The place is quiet, secluded, chosen carefully by the authorities. Mats are laid across the cold earth. A brazier burns faintly, though its warmth does little against the winter wind. Each man has been given a white robe, clean and unadorned, as if to remind them that in death they return to a state of purity, stripped of rank, stripped of pretense. The robes whisper against the ground as they kneel in a long, solemn row. Their leader, Oshi Kuronosuke, sits at the head. His face is calm, steady, marked by neither fear nor trembling. He has carried these men across years of waiting, held them together in secrecy and endurance, guided them through the labyrinth of patience until the hour of action. Now he guides them into death, not as a commander demanding obedience, but as a father who steps first into the darkness so that his children may follow without doubt. The officials who preside over the ritual stand watchful, silent. They are bound to duty, yet even they feel the weight of the moment. For here kneel men who have already passed into legend, though their bodies still live. One by one, each samurai is called forward, a low bow, a final glance toward his companions. Then the act of seppuku begins. The small blade gleams, sharp and final. Hands do not shake, for each man has rehearsed this death 1,000 times in the stillness of his thoughts. The blade enters, the cut is drawn, and in that moment honor is sealed. Beside him stands the kaishakunin, the appointed second, who ends the suffering swiftly with a precise stroke. Death comes as both agony and release, but it is born with the dignity of men who no longer leave for themselves. Oshi watches. He does not waver, though his heart must surely tremble at the sight of his brothers falling one after another into eternity. Yet he knows this is not tragedy, but fulfillment. Their master, Asano Naganori, awaits them beyond the veil, and in death they will stand once more at his side. Incense curls upward into the sky. It mingles with the breath of the men, with the faint sound of snow slipping from the eaves, with the muted cries of distant crows. Time slows. Each death is both singular and part of a greater whole, a bead upon a string that once complete will form the necklace of legend. The youngest among them is but a boy, scarcely 16. His face is pale, but his eyes burn with determination. When his time comes, he kneels with the same steadiness as those twice his age. No one spares him. No one suggests he is too young. For in the code of the samurai, honor is not measured in years but in resolve. His blade finds its path, and his spirit joins the company of the fallen. The eldest is over 70, his hair white as frost, his back bent with the burden of years. Yet when he is called, he rises with surprising strength. He too bows, he too kneels, and with the same blade that once defended his lord, he opens the door to eternity. Youth and age, vigor and frailty, all dissolve here into one shared destiny. At last it is Oshi's turn. The leader of the 47 steps forward, his robe brushing against the mats, his face as calm as morning water. He kneels, straightens his back, and bows once more to his companions. His final words are simple, carried on the breath of a man who has nothing left to seek. We have fulfilled our duty. Let us go together. Then the blade descends, and with it the last thread of resistance is cut. Ushi's head falls, and silence follows, a silence heavy, immense, almost holy. When the final stroke is done, the place is transformed. 47 bodies lie still, white robes stained, their breath gone. But the air is not empty. It thrums with presence, with the invisible weight of devotion, with the echo of voices that will not fade. The snow continues to fall, blanketing the earth, softening the harsh outlines of death, making the scene resemble a dream more than a slaughter. In Edo, word spreads quickly. The people whisper in hushed voices, torn between grief and awe. Some weep for the loss of so many brave men. Others bow their heads in reverence, understanding that they have witnessed not rebellion, but the deepest expression of loyalty. For the samurai did not die grasping for power. They did not seek wealth or dominion. They sought only to restore the honor of their lord, even at the cost of their own lives. The graves are prepared at Sengokuji Temple, near the resting place of Asano Naganori. The bodies are carried there with care, each laid gently into the earth, side by side, companions in death as they were in life. Incense burns at the temple gates, the smoke rising like prayers into the winter sky. Crowds gather, pressing forward to glimpse the graves, to leave offerings, to bow in silence. Even now, centuries later, incense still burns there, the air forever scented with memory. Travelers from distant provinces come to pay their respects. Poets write verses, actors stage plays, woodblock artists carve their likenesses into eternity. The 47 Ronin, once men of flesh and flaw, become symbols, etched into the fabric of Japan's collective soul. Their names are whispered as if they were a prayer, a reminder that honor, once chosen, can outlast death itself. Yet even as their fame spreads, so too does the quiet unease of their story, for in their devotion lies a paradox. To uphold the code of loyalty, they had to defy the law of the shogun. To preserve their master's honor, they had to embrace dishonor in the eyes of the state. Which, then, is greater? Obedience to authority or fidelity to the heart's command? It is a question that lingers, unresolved, haunting the minds of those who contemplate their fate. Still, for the people, the answer is simple. They see not rebels, but martyrs of loyalty. The graves at Sengokuji become a place of pilgrimage, a quiet shrine where incense smoke and falling snow mingle with whispered prayers. Those who visit feel not despair, but a solemn peace, as though standing in the presence of men who have touched eternity. The story passes through the generations. Children grow up hearing the tale, their eyes wide with wonder. Elders retell it by lamplight, their voices soft, reverent. And as the centuries turn, the 47 remain not merely figures of the past, but companions of the present, ghosts who walk gently beside the living, reminding them of the fragile, radiant bond between loyalty and sacrifice. In the hush of night, when the wind stirs through the temple gates and the snow falls like ashes of memory, one can almost hear them still. The murmur of voices, the faint rustle of robes, the silent bow of men who chose death with unflinching hearts. They rest together, their spirits reunited with their Lord, their bodies bound in one eternal fellowship. They do not rebel, they do not fade, they sleep the sleep of honor which no time can erase. And so, beneath the snow of Edo, 47 souls lie side by side. Their story bound not to death but to devotion. Yet as incense rises and memory lingers, another question drifts softly into the night. What happens when honor itself becomes legend, and legend becomes the measure of a nation? Time is a patient river. It carries away empires, smooths the edges of stones, and dims the faces of those once feared. Yet some stories resist its waters. They cling to the banks of memory, not with the grip of power, but with the quiet strength of devotion. The story of the 47 Ronin is one such tale. Their graves remain in Edo, Tokyo, as the city would one day be named. In the temple of Sengokuji, incense still drifts upward like sighs. Visitors bow their heads, not because they are commanded to, but because something in the silence demands reverence. Stones mark the place where each Ronin lies, people bring flowers, coins, cups of sake, offerings to men long gone. 4 centuries have passed, yet the smoke still rises. Why does the story endure? Why does the world remember a band of men who chose death over life? Perhaps because in their silence, we hear our own longing for meaning. In their loyalty, we glimpse a truth that outlives any sword. The Ronin's act was not merely vengeance. It was theatre written with lives. When they stormed Kira's mansion, when they knelt to die by their own blades, they were carving a parable into the heart of Japan. It was not only an act of war, nor of law, but of symbol, and symbols, unlike men, do not fade. From the Edo period onward, their tale was carried into the floating world of art. Playwrights shaped their memory into Chushingura, the treasury of loyal retainers. The stage glowed with painted snow, with whispered vows, with the clash of steel that echoed long after the curtain fell. Yet, because the shogunate feared rebellion, the story could not be told as it truly was. The names were changed, the setting shifted, but everyone knew. When audiences sat in the shadowed halls of kabuki, watching a band of retainers avenge their master, they were not merely entertained. They were reminded of a code written deeper than law. Poets too took up the Ronin's memory. In verses short as a breath, they spoke of falling snow, of footprints in silence, of graves that bloom with chrysanthemums each winter. Painters brushed the scene into woodblock prints, black ink and pale white flakes, the Ronin as shadows moving through a drifting world. In each retelling, the heart of the story grew stronger, not weaker. But memory is never still. Each generation sees what it needs in the mirror of the past. For the merchants of Edo, the Ronin were proof that loyalty could be purchased with patience, not gold. For the samurai, they were reminders that Bushido was more than words, that a man's life was only as honorable as his death. And for the common people who bore the weight of taxes and toil, the Ronin's tale was a chance to imagine that dignity was possible even in suffering, that a small band of men could stand against insult and injustice. When Japan stepped into the modern age, their story did not vanish. The Meiji era swept away the world of the samurai. Swords were forbidden, top knots cut away, armor left to rust in temples. Trains roared across the land where once men rode on horseback. Factories smoked where castles had stood. Yet even as modernity rose, the Ronin lingered. In a Japan searching for new identity, their loyalty became a compass. To honor them was to honor the spirit of the past, even as the present shifted. School children learned their tale not as entertainment, but as lesson. The Ronin were lifted into the realm of national myth, like Rome's Horatius at the bridge or Greece's Thermopylae. They became more than men. They became a parable of belonging. The nation could change, but honor must endure, and so the Ronin were never allowed to die. They walked onto the stages of No and Kabuki. They crossed oceans in translation, their story finding readers in far-off lands who marveled at the strangeness of men who would rather die than live dishonored. Westerners, steeped in tales of knights and crusades, saw in them a mirror both familiar and foreign. These were not soldiers for conquest, but guardians of a code. Even in the 20th century, through war and ruin, their story was told. Japan saw new battles, new devastations, yet the Ronin remained as memory untouched. Films retold the night of falling snow. Television carried their march of silence into living rooms. Novels and essays re-examined their vow. And at Sengakoji, the graves remained, stones weathered by rain yet never abandoned. Perhaps what makes their memory so enduring is that it carries no triumph. The Ronin did not rise to power. They did not inherit wealth or land. They did not secure dynasties or rule empires. Instead, they surrendered themselves to loss. They embraced a death chosen freely. In their very surrender lies the purity of their tale. It is a story of men who gave everything for a promise that could not benefit them, only honor the one they served. What does it mean to live with such devotion in an age that prizes survival, ambition, progress? Their act seems almost impossible to grasp, and yet it is this impossibility that captivates. To listen to their story is to be reminded that life is not measured only in years lived, but in the weight of the vows we carry. The snow of Edo has long melted, but its silence still lingers in the imagination. When winter falls in Japan, some still think of the 47 men moving through the flakes, their footsteps muffled, their resolve clear. When incense curls above their graves, it is not only smoke but memory rising. And so the Ronin walk beside us, though their swords are sheathed forever. They appear in plays and novels, in cinema and song. They appear in the hushed prayers of those who bow before their stones. They appear whenever loyalty is questioned, whenever honor is weighed against law, whenever silence speaks louder than violence. Their story is no longer theirs alone. It belongs to everyone who has ever carried a promise through difficulty, to everyone who has ever wondered whether dignity is worth more than survival. The Ronin remind us that there are truths deeper than victory, that patience can be sharper than rage, that devotion can outlast death. And so they echo through centuries, through voices, through the drifting snow of memory. The Ronin's footsteps fade, yet their silence still speaks across time. And as the world remembers them, we are left with a question: what is it that truly endures? The power of law or the loyalty of the human heart? And so the snow settles long after the blades have rusted. The night of the Ronin fades into memory, yet their vow lingers, like a candle that refuses to go out, its flame sheltered by the hands of time. They chose not life, but honor, and in that surrender they became something more than men. They became an echo, whispering to us that loyalty can weigh heavier than steel, and that silence, when carried with purpose, can thunder louder than any shout. Tonight, you have walked with them, step by step through snow and stillness. Their story is no longer only theirs, it is now a small part of you, not a burden, but a gentle thread woven into your quiet reflections. It reminds us that though centuries may pass, the truths of dignity, patience, and devotion do not fade. They hum beneath history, waiting to be remembered. Thank you for sharing this quiet space with me tonight. In listening, you've joined a circle far larger than you and I, a circle that stretches through generations, across oceans and time zones, where stories are kept alive by hearts willing to hold them. Your presence here is a gift, and I am grateful. Now, it is time to let the story rest, and with it, to let your own body soften. Release the weight of the day. Let your thoughts grow lighter, like snowflakes dissolving on the wind. May your dreams carry you gently through the night, and may the stillness of the Ronin walk with you, bringing peace to every corner of your rest. This has been the Sleeping Hourglass, where the past tucks you in and history drifts softly into lullaby. If this brought you calm, know you are always welcome to return whenever you need another quiet step through time. Good night, dear listener. Sleep deeply, sleep peacefully, and let the echoes of history cradle you into dawn.